"You're just dead weight," Victoria said with a smirk as she strolled around my desk. "We're cutting costs, and frankly, your position is unnecessary." The office fell silent. 20 co-workers froze over their keyboards, pretending not to watch as our CEO publicly dismantled my 3 years at Montgomery Pharmaceuticals. "You barely contribute in meetings," she continued, voice carrying across the open floor plan. "You question processes that have worked for years. Your reports are consistently late." None of that was true, but I maintained my composure, hands folded calmly in my lap. "You have until the end of the day to clear out your desk. HR has your paperwork." Victoria's heels clicked triumphantly as she walked away, not bothering to lower her voice as she added, "Some people just don't understand what it takes to succeed in this industry." I smiled and responded simply, "Fine, fire me." Victoria paused mid-stride, clearly disappointed by my calm acceptance. She'd expected tears or pleading, not quiet dignity. "I'm Eve Montgomery, 47 years old, and what Victoria doesn't know is that I own 87% of the company that bears my family name. 3 years ago, I stepped down as the public face of Montgomery Pharmaceuticals when my father passed away, leaving me controlling interest. The board hired Victoria King to lead the company into a new era of growth, unaware I had very specific plans of my own. Rather than watching from afar, I wanted to understand how our company operated from the inside. With a new hairstyle, my mother's maiden name on my ID badge, and a mid-level position in research analytics, I became invisible, just another employee. For 3 years, I observed. I documented cost-cutting measures that compromised quality. I witnessed talented colleagues leave after being belittled by Victoria and her inner circle. I saw our once collaborative culture transform into a toxic environment of fear and favoritism. I had planned to remain undercover for another 6 months, but Victoria's public humiliation accelerated my timeline. The shareholders' meeting tomorrow would now serve a different purpose than the quarterly update Victoria was expecting. As I packed my desk, I noticed Alan from legal watching me with a concerned expression. Alan had worked for Montgomery since before I was born, and was one of 3 people who knew my true identity. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly, glancing toward Victoria's office. "It will be," I assured him. His brow furrowed as he leaned closer. "She's making bigger moves than you know. The termination list for tomorrow's meeting." He hesitated. "It's extensive. Entire departments." I felt my shoulders tense. This was worse than I had anticipated. Victoria wasn't just changing our culture. She was dismantling the company's foundation to boost short-term profits. "Thank you, Alan," I said, meeting his eyes meaningfully. "I'll see you tomorrow." Montgomery Pharmaceuticals wasn't just a company to me, it was my heritage. My grandfather started in his garage, developing affordable alternatives to expensive medications. My father expanded it into a mid-sized operation respected for both innovation and integrity. We never became pharmaceutical giants like our competitors, but that was intentional. Our mission had always been about balance, profitable enough to drive research, ethical enough to put patients before profits. When my father died unexpectedly from a heart attack, I was working in our Seattle research division. The board, nervous about maintaining investor confidence, wanted to quickly name a new CEO. Though I had the experience and the controlling interest, I suggested we look externally for someone who could bring fresh energy. Victoria King came with impeccable credentials: MBA from Stanford, successful leadership positions at 2 major healthcare companies, and an impressive record of increasing profitability. Her interview was flawless. She spoke eloquently about maintaining our core values while pursuing strategic growth. The board was smitten. I was cautiously optimistic. My decision to work anonymously within the company was unorthodox but necessary. I needed unfiltered truth, not the polished reports that reached executive levels. I created a new identity as Eve Daniels, leveraging my background in pharmaceutical research to secure a position analyzing efficiency in our development pipeline. The first year under Victoria showed promising results. Profits increased by 18%, and we expanded into 2 new therapeutic areas. From my position, however, I noticed concerning trends. Research budgets were quietly being reduced. Long-time employees were being replaced with contractors. Quality control measures were streamlined to the point of risk. In meetings, Victoria presented herself as a visionary leader. She had charisma, intelligence, and an uncanny ability to make difficult decisions sound necessary and forward-thinking. She spoke about strategic realignment and operational efficiency, while systematically undermining everything that made Montgomery special. I tried addressing concerns through proper channels. As Eve Daniels, I submitted reports highlighting potential quality issues. I spoke up in departmental meetings. I proposed alternative approaches that wouldn't compromise our standards. Victoria consistently dismissed these efforts, eventually labeling me a negative influence in my performance review. Initially, I respected Victoria's ambition and drive, believing she genuinely wanted to make Montgomery better, just with a different approach than our families. But watching her operate day to day revealed her true priorities: short-term profits, personal advancement, and control. The day before my termination, I overheard Victoria speaking to our CFO in the break room. "Once we streamline these departments and move production offshore, we'll be perfectly positioned for the Axiom merger," she said. "My bonus will be astronomical." Merger? This was the first I'd heard of any merger plans that would require board and shareholder approval, plans that would require my approval. The morning after my termination, I arrived at my apartment's lobby to find Diane from Human Resources waiting for me. Her anxious expression suggested this wasn't a friendly visit. "Ms. Daniels," she began nervously, "I have your separation agreement." She handed me a thick envelope. "Ms. King asked me to personally ensure you understand the confidentiality clauses." I glanced through the document, noting the extensive non-disparagement sections and the pitiful severance offer: 2 weeks' pay in exchange for signing away my right to discuss anything about Montgomery. "There's also this," Diane added, passing me another form. "It's a notification that your company-subsidized apartment must be vacated within 30 days. I had forgotten that my building was one of Montgomery's employee housing investments. Victoria was apparently leaving nothing to chance. "Thank you, Diane," I said, taking both documents. "I'll review these carefully." She shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else you should know. It's not official yet, but—" She lowered her voice. "Victoria is planning to outsource the entire research division to India. Over 100 people will lose their jobs after the quarterly meeting." The research division was Montgomery's heart, dedicated scientists who had developed life-changing medications. Many had been with us for decades. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because it's wrong," she answered simply. "Your reports were right about the quality concerns. 2 of our trial medications failed last-stage testing because of the shortcuts she implemented. She buried those results and fired the team leads." This was worse than I had imagined. Victoria wasn't just changing company culture. She was jeopardizing patient safety and our scientific integrity. "Thank you for your honesty," I said. "I appreciate the risk you're taking." After Diane left, I sat in my lobby, processing this new information. My experiment in anonymity had shown me exactly what I needed to see. But at what cost? How many careers had been damaged? How many patients put at risk? My phone buzzed with a message from Alan. Meeting moved up to 10 a.m. Victoria presenting new strategy to board and key shareholders. Merger announcement expected. She had accelerated the timeline, likely hoping to push through her agenda before any opposition could organize. I checked my watch. It was 8:30 a.m. I had 90 minutes to prepare. In my home office, I pulled up the contingency plan I'd been developing over the past year. It detailed a complete restructuring of leadership, reinvestment in our core values, and protection for the employees who made Montgomery what it was. I had hoped not to need it, but Victoria had forced my hand. As I dressed for the meeting, selecting the tailored suit I hadn't worn in 3 years, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Disappointment that Victoria had betrayed the company's trust, anger at the callous way she treated dedicated employees, guilt that my experiment had allowed her to cause so much damage. My phone buzzed again, Alan with an update. Victoria's assistant accidentally sent me tomorrow's press release draft. They're announcing the closure of the Seattle facility. 230 jobs eliminated. My grandfather had started in Seattle. My father had expanded the facility, creating hundreds of well-paying jobs in a community that desperately needed them. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. Victoria hadn't just attacked the company. She had attacked my family's legacy. I tucked my tablet into my briefcase, my resolve hardening. It was time to step out of the shadows. Montgomery Pharmaceuticals occupied the top 5 floors of a sleek building in downtown Chicago. I entered through the main lobby, nodding to security guards who didn't recognize me in my executive attire. Instead of taking the general elevator to the analytics department on the 3rd floor, I swiped a keycard I hadn't used in 3 years and entered the executive elevator. The boardroom was on the top floor, a spacious area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. As I approached, I could hear Victoria's confident voice through the partially open door. Unprecedented opportunity for growth. The Axiom merger will position us to compete with industry leaders while providing exceptional shareholder value. I paused, listening. She was already discussing the merger, presenting it as a foregone conclusion. What about the research division, someone asked. Harold Jensen, our longest-serving board member. Montgomery's reputation is built on innovation. Research can be done more cost-effectively elsewhere, Victoria replied smoothly. We're trimming unnecessary expenses to maximize our appeal to Axiom. Speaking of which, I've prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan. It was time. I pushed the door open and entered. 14 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to confusion to, in Alan's case, carefully concealed satisfaction. Victoria recovered quickly. I'm sorry, this is a private meeting. Security will escort you out. She reached for the phone, but Harold spoke first. Eve, is that you? Hello, Harold, I said calmly, setting my briefcase on the table. It's been a while. Victoria's hand froze mid-reach. Eve? As in? Eve Montgomery, I confirmed, majority shareholder and former CEO. The blood drained from Victoria's face. But you're Eve Daniels from Analytics. A necessary measure to understand the company's operations firsthand, I explained, addressing the room rather than just her. And what I've learned has been illuminating. This is highly irregular, Victoria stammered, trying to regain control. Ms. Montgomery, while we appreciate your interest, this meeting is for current leadership to present our strategic vision. A vision that includes dismantling our Seattle facility, outsourcing research, and merging with Axiom Pharmaceuticals, I interrupted, all without board approval or shareholder vote. The room fell silent. Several board members exchanged concerned glances. These are preliminary discussions, Victoria insisted. Nothing has been decided. I withdrew a document from my briefcase. Then why does this press release, scheduled for tomorrow, announce these changes as finalized decisions? I placed copies in front of each board member. Victoria's expression hardened as she recognized the document her assistant had accidentally sent to Alan. This is a misunderstanding, she said, her voice tight. A draft created to explore potential scenarios. Perhaps we should discuss your termination of Eve Daniels as well, I suggested. And the pattern of removing employees who raise legitimate concerns about quality and safety? Victoria's eyes narrowed. You are underperforming. The documentation is clear. So clear that you felt the need to publicly humiliate me in front of the entire department? To immediately revoke my housing? To offer 2 weeks severance for 3 years of service? The board members were watching this exchange with growing discomfort. Victoria sensed her position weakening. I understand you're upset, she said, adopting a conciliatory tone. But these decisions, while difficult, are necessary for Montgomery's future. The pharmaceutical landscape is changing and we must adapt. For a moment, her confident demeanor made me doubt myself. She was masterful, presenting harmful cuts as inevitable adaptations. No wonder the board had been persuaded by her vision. You're right about one thing, I conceded. We do need to adapt. Victoria smiled, sensing victory. I'm glad you understand. Which is why, I continued, as the majority shareholder of Montgomery Pharmaceuticals, I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in your leadership. The smile froze on Victoria's face. You can't do that. Actually, Alan interjected, sliding a document toward her. According to company bylaws, she can. Victoria's composure cracked. This is absurd. The board appointed me CEO. Only they can remove me. With all due respect, I countered, that's not entirely accurate. I distributed another document to the board members. Article 7, Section 3 of our corporate charter grants the majority shareholder emergency removal powers if the CEO acts contrary to company interests without board approval. The board members began reviewing the document, heads bowed in concentration. Victoria remained standing, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. The merger discussions were preliminary, she insisted. Nothing has been signed. But you've already taken concrete actions, I pointed out. You've terminated employees, compromised quality protocols, and prepared public announcements, all without proper authorization. Harold Jensen cleared his throat. Eve is correct about the charter provisions. However, we should discuss these accusations thoroughly before taking any action. I nodded. I agree, which is why I've prepared this. I connected my tablet to the room's display system. The screen filled with a detailed timeline of changes implemented under Victoria's leadership. Research budget cuts disguised as efficiency measures, quality control reductions hidden in technical jargon, terminated employees who had raised concerns, failed drug trials that never appeared in reports to the board. Where did you get this information? Victoria demanded. I worked in the company for 3 years, documenting everything, I replied. But what truly concerns me is this. I switched to the next screen. A financial analysis showing how these changes, while boosting short-term profits, had created substantial long-term risks. Pending lawsuits from patients experiencing side effects from hastily developed drugs, potential FDA violations that could result in massive fines, and the imminent loss of our most experienced researchers. The board members looked increasingly troubled. Victoria must have sensed the mood shifting because she abruptly changed tactics. Even if there were some procedural oversights, she argued, the results speak for themselves. Profits are up 42% since I took over. Our stock has nearly doubled. At what cost? I challenged. Our reputation for quality? The safety of our patients? The institutional knowledge of employees who built this company? Business requires tough decisions, Victoria said dismissively. Your father understood that, even if you don't. The mention of my father ignited something inside me. My father understood that Montgomery's success was built on integrity and innovation, not cutting corners for quick profits. Victoria smirked. Your father also understood the importance of professional leadership. He specifically requested an experienced CEO take over after his death because he wasn't confident in your abilities. The words hit like a physical blow. Had my father really doubted me? Had he shared those doubts with Victoria? That's not true, Harold interrupted, his usually calm voice sharp with anger. Robert Montgomery never said any such thing. I was his closest friend on this board, and he was immensely proud of Eve's contributions to this company. Relief flooded through me, followed by renewed determination. Victoria was lying, desperately trying to undermine my confidence. Ms. King, Harold continued, I think it's time you step outside while the board discusses these matters. Victoria's expression hardened. I don't take orders from... Security can escort you if necessary, Harold suggested mildly. After Victoria reluctantly left, the boardroom erupted in concerned discussions. I remained silent, letting them process the information I'd presented. Finally, Harold called for order. Before we vote, there's something you should all know. He looked directly at me. Victoria hasn't just been planning a merger. She's been negotiating to sell Montgomery's proprietary research to Axiom separately, research Eve's team developed before Victoria arrived. Shocked murmurs filled the room. This wasn't just about jobs or cost-cutting anymore. Victoria had been planning to sell the company's most valuable assets, innovations that could help millions of patients, for her personal gain. "How do you know this?" I asked Harold. He slid a folder across the table. "Because Axiom approached me last week, thinking I was already aware of the arrangement." Inside were emails between Victoria and Axiom's CEO, discussing the sale of our research portfolio for a fraction of its value, with a substantial consulting fee directed to Victoria personally. The betrayal was complete. Victoria hadn't just compromised our company's values, she had betrayed its very purpose. The board's vote was unanimous. Victoria would be removed immediately. However, her termination alone wouldn't solve our deeper problems. The company culture had deteriorated, trust was broken, and we needed to prevent similar situations in the future. "We need to announce this change before markets close," said Elise Chen, our marketing director. "Otherwise, rumors will spread." "And what about the Seattle facility?" "The research division," asked another board member. "Victoria's team has already set those wheels in motion." "I have a comprehensive transition plan," I assured them. "But we need to move quickly. Victoria won't leave quietly." As if on cue, the boardroom door flew open. Victoria stormed in, followed by two men I didn't recognize. "This emergency board meeting violates proper notification procedures," she announced triumphantly. "My legal team agrees that any decisions made today are invalid." The lawyers behind her nodded confidently. One stepped forward. "As outside counsel for Montgomery Pharmaceuticals, I must advise the board that proper protocols for CEO removal haven't been followed." "You're not our outside counsel," Allen countered, rising from his seat. "Brenner and Associates has represented Montgomery for 30 years. "Not anymore," Victoria said smugly. "I terminated that relationship last month. Collins and Westfield now represents us." This was a complication I hadn't anticipated. If Victoria had changed our legal representation without board approval, it could create enough confusion to delay her removal. Markets would close, rumors would spread, and she might have time to implement her plans. "This is outrageous," Harold protested. "Changing legal counsel requires board approval." "Which I received," Victoria countered, producing a document. 3 board members signed off on it. I examined the document. 3 signatures appeared at the bottom, board members Victoria had personally recruited after taking over. "We need to adjourn and sort this out properly," one of Victoria's supporters suggested. "These hasty decisions could expose us to liability." Doubt crept into the room. Board members exchanged uncertain glances. I needed to act decisively. "Before we continue, I'd like to introduce someone." I pressed the intercom button. "Please send in our guest." The door opened again, and an older gentleman in an impeccable suit entered. "Hello, everyone. I apologize for the interruption." Victoria's face drained of color. "Jerome Collins. What are you doing here?" Collins, the founding partner of her supposedly new law firm, nodded politely toward Victoria before addressing the board. "I'm here at Ms. Montgomery's request to clarify a situation. Collins and Westfield has never been retained by Montgomery Pharmaceuticals. The document claiming otherwise appears to use a forged signature from my office." The room fell silent. Victoria's lawyers exchanged alarmed glances. "Furthermore," Collins continued, "I should note that impersonating legal counsel constitutes fraud. These gentlemen," he gestured to Victoria's lawyers, "are not attorneys at my firm." One of the men slipped quietly toward the door. "Additionally," Collins added, "I've reviewed the corporate charter Ms. Montgomery provided. Her authority as majority shareholder is quite clear." Victoria's desperate gambit was collapsing, but she had one card left to play. "Even if you remove me," she said, turning to the board, "you can't undo the agreements already in place. The Seattle closure, the research outsourcing, those plans are already filed with regulatory bodies." "Actually," I interjected, No regulatory filings have been submitted. I checked this morning. And our preliminary agreement with Axiom, she challenged, is subject to board approval, which it never received, Harold added. Victoria's face contorted with fury. You planned this all along, didn't you? Working undercover, gathering information, you set me up. No, Victoria, I replied calmly. You did that yourself when you prioritized short-term profits over our company's integrity. She turned to the 3 board members she had appointed. You need to support me on this. Remember our discussions about your compensation packages after the merger? The implication of improper arrangements hung in the air. 2 of her appointees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The third, however, straightened his posture. Ms. King, are you suggesting we had some sort of personal arrangement regarding the merger? Because that would constitute a serious breach of fiduciary duty. Victoria realized too late that she had implicated herself in yet another ethical violation. Her last support on the board was evaporating. As security arrived to escort Victoria and her fake legal team from the building, I took my seat at the head of the table. The position had been mine all along. I had simply needed to reclaim it. The next morning, I arrived early for the company-wide meeting I had called. The auditorium filled quickly with anxious employees who had heard rumors but knew nothing concrete. My former colleagues from the analytics department did double takes when they saw me at the podium, dressed in executive attire rather than my usual business casual. Victoria had been scheduled to announce the strategic restructuring at this meeting. Instead, she was clearing out her office under security supervision. Good morning, I began once everyone was seated. For those who don't know me, I'm Eve Montgomery. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of you knew me as Eve Daniels from the analytics department. That was by design. For the past 3 years, I've worked alongside you, experiencing firsthand the changes in our company culture and operations. I outlined briefly what had transpired: Victoria's removal, the canceled merger, the saved jobs. With each revelation, the tension in the room gradually transformed into cautious relief. Yesterday, Victoria King fired me, calling me dead weight. Today, I want to address what makes someone valuable to Montgomery Pharmaceuticals. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. Photos of employees from every department, from research scientists to maintenance staff. Value isn't determined by title or salary. It's measured by integrity, dedication, and commitment to our mission, creating affordable, effective medications that improve lives. I continued through my restructuring plan, not the one Victoria had envisioned, but one that reinforced our core values while adapting to market realities. No mass layoffs, no quality compromises, no abandoned research projects. Additionally, we're implementing a new board position specifically representing employee interests, ensuring your voices are heard at the highest level. As I spoke, I noticed my former supervisor from analytics wiping away tears. Nearby, researchers who had feared for their jobs were smiling with renewed hope. Finally, I concluded, I want to acknowledge the toxic leadership environment many of you have endured. That ends today. The auditorium erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then building to a thunderous affirmation. After the meeting, Victoria stood in the lobby, security guards flanking her as she waited for her car. She'd been permitted to collect personal belongings, but nothing else. No files, no company data, no proprietary information. I approached her, maintaining a professional distance. You won't succeed, she said, bitterness evident in her voice. The market is changing. Your father's approach is outdated. Montgomery will be obsolete within 5 years. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but will be obsolete with our integrity intact. Victoria laughed coldly. Integrity doesn't pay shareholders. Actually, sustainable growth based on quality products and ethical practices pays shareholders quite well, I countered. It just requires patience and vision beyond quarterly reports. Her car arrived, but before leaving, she turned back. You know, I almost feel sorry for you. You could have learned something from me. I did learn from you, Victoria, I replied. I learned exactly how I don't want to lead. She departed without another word, her defeat complete. The company she had tried to dismantle would now thrive without her, strengthened by the very values she had tried to eliminate. Back in my office, my father's old office, which Victoria had redecorated in cold modern minimalism, I found Alan waiting with a bottle of champagne. "Congratulations," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so," I replied, accepting the glass. "There's still so much to fix." Alan smiled. "But now you have an entire company eager to help you do it." He was right. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in years, Montgomery Pharmaceuticals was united by a common purpose again. On my desk sat a framed photo of my father that Victoria had removed. Next to it, I placed a new one, a candid shot from the company picnic last summer, showing me with my analytics team, laughing and unaware of the camera. Both images represented parts of my identity: Montgomery the legacy and Eve the colleague. Together, they would guide the company forward. "To new beginnings," I toasted. "And to the best kind of revenge," Alan added. "Success on your own terms."